What is up, my peeps? Joshua Smith here at GSD Studios. First off, thank you so much for checking out today's content. I'll make this extremely fast, but I need to plug our sponsors that make this show possible. Our first sponsor is perfectstormnow.com. By far the most effective and affordable real estate agent website and database platform in the industry. It is the system I use to sell 50 plus homes every single month. Check it out at www.perfectstormnow.com. Our second sponsor is my personal 90-day mastery bootcamp, which is, again, my personal real estate agent mentorship program where we spend 90 days together, 12 live sessions. You get daily access to me inside the program. You guys, we go so extremely in-depth. There's nothing that's incomplete about this program. You're going to get all the tools that you need to go out there and crush it inside your real estate business. Make sure to go check us out, www.90daymastery.com. You can watch in-depth videos of exactly what's covered to see if the program is for you. See all the raving testimonials we have from all of the amazing agents and clients that went through the program. So make sure to check us out, www.90daymastery.com. All right, you guys, let's jump on into today's content. What is up, my peeps? Joshua Smith here with another GSD mode interview where every single week we interview top entrepreneurs and just straight up top badasses that they're dominating their space. These are people choosing to not live a life of mediocrity, but instead to go out there and create big, amazing, epic lives for them, their families, as well as have a big impact on others while they exist. So today, you guys, got a special guest on our show. So our guest today, best-selling author who sold over 2 million books, author of The Go-Giver and Take the Lead, which was named is the #1 leadership book of the year in 2011. So really stoked and honored to have John David Mann on the show. Welcome to the show, my friend.
Great to be here.
Yeah, no, I'm excited. So before, before we talk about what you're doing today, I'm always really intrigued in our guest journey that led them into what they're doing in the first place. So if you rewind the clocks, whatever that looks like, I mean, what got you into writing and being, obviously the best-selling author that you are today? Like, what led to that journey?
It's like we need like an hour and a half for that. Because I have the strangest background. I have a strange career because I've my career on paper looks a little bit like a pinball machine. I have gone through a number of different incarnations. I call it the reinventions of myself. And I've reinvented myself like 3, 4, 5 times. So without going into the whys of that, I'll just do a quick bang, 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 just to orient readers in this point in time. I started out as a concert cellist, classical musician, composer. My dad was a choral conductor and musicologist. And I went from there to education. Some friends and I started a school, high school, when I was 17. I dropped out of high school and started a high school, went to the high school, and then taught at the high school. I don't know how that works, but that's what I did. So I think that was my first taste really of being an entrepreneur, even though I didn't think of it as that. And it wasn't like I had any financial return and didn't own it. But, when you're 17 years old, creating a high school and then, having graduates come out of that high school and go to colleges all over the country, Harvard and Yale and everything, that was an entrepreneurial adventure. And I think I learned lessons out of that experience that I probably couldn't have described or articulated then, but looking back, I think it was very formative. And then I got into nutrition and natural health, did that for years. I got into sales and business and did that for years. And at every different turn, I was editing people's stuff. I kind of have an academic background. I never went to college, but my parents were both teachers. My dad was a college professor. I was always around scholarly and academic things and good writing. So I spent maybe 10 years writing for business journals and doing a lot of editing. And then I like to say Bob Berg ruined my career. I had, they say the way to make God laugh is you make a plan.
Right. Yep.
So the big man has been in stitches for my whole lifetime. So I had this plan in 2004. I was on my way to Hollywood. I was going to be a screenwriter. I had studied screenwriting. I was writing scripts. I've been out there. I have great screenwriting teacher. I still am in touch with him, Hal Croasman, best screenwriting teacher in Hollywood. And Hal taught me a lot about writing. And that was my plan. And my friend Bob Berg shot me an email and said, would you like write this book with me? I have this book I want to write. But it's not the kind of book that I write. So I need you to write it with me. And we had never written anything together. So I was like, I don't want to do that. That's a distraction. That's not my plan. I'm going to Hollywood. I'm not writing books. That's not what I do. But it's Bob, So because of the relationship, I jumped in, and that was the Go-Giver. That really launched my career as an author. And I never did get to Hollywood, maybe someday, but here I am. And good thing for me, because it has worked out really well. Bob and I are still writing together.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. So, I mean, I've got a lot of follow-up questions there. So, okay, 17 years, you drop out of high school, and then you decide to start a high school that then you graduate from, and as you explained there, what led to that? I mean, did you see a kind of a broken system, with the current high school that you were in, or
in a sense, yes. I mean, I wouldn't have put it in grandiose terms. I wouldn't have put it in the general terms like that. Like we see a system, more like that was our experience. A bunch of us sitting around one day, friends we'd been to the same school as kids, as younger kids, and now we were all at our different public high schools, and we were all bored at our schools. We were like, schools are like just glorified babysitting. We're not really learning anything that interests us. It wasn't like we wanted an alternative school where we could go just drop out and do nothing. We wanted a school where we could plug in and do everything. Like we had a hunger to learn, to study real stuff, whether it was computer programming or nutrition or modern literature or history or, whatever it was. We wanted to learn real hands-on practical stuff across all, categories and subjects and dimensions. And so we did. We created the school. The first semester, first of all, I should say, we were blessed to have, a few of us had parents who, instead of saying, don't be ridiculous, said, that's interesting. Keep talking. And they encouraged us. So thank you, Mom. Thank you, Dad. That was, I think, the thing that made this work. So one of the first things we did is decide that we needed a director who was an adult, because we didn't know what the hell we were doing. So we needed like a real person. So we did. We interviewed about a half dozen really interesting people, acquaintances of parents or friends or whatever. And we hired this fascinating guy with an academic background who went on to become a very successful novelist. He's still today alive, just turned 90. We're still in touch. Yeah, amazing man, Julian F. Thompson, a wonderful novelist. Anyhow, we interviewed him and we hired him for the starting salary of, let's see, what was it? In 1971, $0. That's right. It was $0. We hired him for nothing, and he came to work for us, and we created the school. Our first semester, we had 50 kids and 51 topic subjects.
Wow.
And I was in charge of making the schedule. So I don't know how I did that without a computer, but we did it.
Yeah. So then is the I know that you're not, well, at least I guess an assumption is that you're still not involved with the school today, but is it still, does it still exist?
No, it had a great run. It ran for about a decade. I was involved with it for a couple of years. I went back, as I said, I taught there, and then I went on to do stuff that I did, and the director eventually left, and it had a succession of staff, and then as these things often do, it outlived its life cycle. And eventually, I don't even know the circumstances of its closing because I wasn't close, but it went for about a decade and had a great run.
Yeah. So then it sounds like your kind of first passion was music.
Yes.
It was what was, but it doesn't sound. And I don't know if you still are involved in music, but was that more of because your father was so involved that you came to maybe a realization that it was. That was a goal maybe that you were chasing to appease your parents or your father, and then you made a transition, or, because it was a passion that it seemed like you didn't end up continuing to chase.
Yeah, it's funny. It definitely was not something I was pursuing for their sake. They never pushed me in that direction, or it wasn't one of those things like I got to be a doctor because my dad was a doctor. I did grow up around music constantly. There was chamber music happening in my house. There was, I was surrounded by great music. And so it was a natural passion. It's still my first love. I'm not involved in music professionally now. Both my brothers are. But it wasn't that there was anything that pushed me away from it. It's so much as that I've always been fascinated by a lot of things. And I was really drawn. I was drawn by philosophy. I was drawn by nutrition. I was drawn by Eastern philosophy and the whole sort of natural foods thing tied in with that back in the 70s and the 80s. And then I got very drawn by business and very drawn by different business models. And I also had a hunger to, what's the word? Be rich, to be wealthy. I was not, the life of poverty did not interest me. And it was what I saw ahead of me in my chosen career as a composer. If I had gone to Hollywood as a film composer, I'm sure that could have been a lucrative path, but I wanted to find something that was both philosophically satisfying and also that would economically work. Took a while.
Yeah. Yeah. So then going through, all these reinventions, as you put it, and I just love that because it's, so often, people think they don't get that. Sometimes the journey just has to happen, right? Sometimes you don't feel like you're in the right place at the right time, but it's like typically you're always in the right place at the right time. And you were able to connect the dots of, because before this experience and before all that editing, had you ever even considered writing?
Even when I was editing, I didn't think I would never have answered the question, what do you want to do, with, I want to be a writer. It wasn't until, I got to tell you, so I am 63 years old right now, okay? I really invented this career I'm in right now maybe a decade ago. So I was already past 50 when I woke up one day and said, damn, I think I'm a writer. I think that's what's going on here. I think that's where we're going. I had the Hollywood thing. That was the plan. And then it turned into, instead of films and screenplays and scripts, it turned into its books. And even, what kind of books has been a moving target, has been a moving subject. I never planned to sit down with a Navy SEAL sniper and write 5 books. But I'm working on book number 6. I was working on it right before this call with my Navy SEAL sniper buddy. It's like, what?
Yeah.
So my point in that is, it is truly never too late and never too impossible to reinvent your career, especially in this world we live in.
Yep. So then when, Bob reached out to you to start your first venture together, your first book, the Go-Giver, because one thing, I think at least most entrepreneurs that I speak with, they all have a dream of writing a book and becoming a best-selling author, right? Whether that may be, some might want to do it because it gives credibility to their consulting and coaching business, and some just have a passion for it. But man, it's so hard to dial in, what to write about, what to have success with, and get it right. How did you know that, that you had a winner, or did you, or was it just maybe having that faith in Bob and knowing that combining your two talents, you could create something great?
It was, we thought now Bob had written a few books, and I had sort of ghost written or helped write, or what, I had been involved in a number of books that don't have my name on them, but we both felt we had a tiger by the tail. We both felt we had it was Bob's concept, this idea, take go-getter and switch around to go-giver, and put the focus on other people rather than on yourself. That's not only a generous and noble thing to do, but also a practical and lucrative thing to do. That was the fundamental concept or paradigm shift of the Go-Giver, was that putting other people's interests first is not only a generous and noble and philosophically satisfying thing to do, it's also a practical way to live. It also can be financially practical in a business sense. And that was the fundamental idea. It's not an either or deal. It's not like I can put your interest or look out for myself. It's not a self-sacrificing thing of, to help you, I will sacrifice myself. No. We were saying, look for other people and you'll get taken care of handsomely. And that idea seemed to touch a chord. And we thought that the idea was killer And we also knew that the style of writing, I had just come off this intensive screenwriting course in dialogue when I started working on The Go-Giver. And it was just one of those things where the sparks just happened. And we've done a couple of Go-Giver parables since then. We have a new one coming out next spring, actually. And they all work the same way. They go in like 6 weeks. It's like we take a few months to get the concept together, and then you just touch a match to it, and it goes brrrr. Yeah. Because I've had books that have taken me 9 months to a year to write, or longer. But these don't work that way. So to answer your question, though, let me answer around your question a little bit, because it's really, what you're getting at is so important. It's like everybody who wants to write a book wants to write a bestseller, right? Well, everybody who wants to start a business wants to start a business that's going to go nuclear, right? That's going to go stratospheric. It's going to, go IPO and go bananas, and they're going to get back, $1,000 to one. Everybody wants a big success. So use me as an example. I just finished my 24th book. So I got 24 books out there. For me, every book does two things. It's a book. It's a vehicle for expression of ideas through which I hope to touch people's lives and make a difference in people's lives. That's satisfying as a creative, expressive act. But every book is also a business. It's like I put in 6 months, 9 months, a year, I invest my time, and my family has to live on that. And my business model is I want a book is successful to me as a business if it pays me back my investment and earns residual for years to come, if it creates an ongoing income stream. Just like a business. You want a business to not only pay back the investors, but you also want to generate an income stream for you as the years go by, because you're the founder of the business. So 24 books, all 24 are successful in my view as books. They're all satisfying. They all have readership who love it. Like this Take the Lead, you said, best business book of 2011. That's very satisfying. All successful as books. Only a handful are successful as businesses. As businesses, most of them are failures. And I'll say that quite honestly. As businesses, most of them have failed. That is to say, they haven't paid back the publisher's advance, or they haven't paid it back and then generated an ongoing income stream. I still love them. It's like all my kids. I love them all, right? Yep. But not all of them have graduated college. It's kind of like that. So my point is, you can't know which ones are going to be. We were pretty sure Go-Giver was going to work, but I've had some books that I was just sure were going to be monsters, and they tanked. They just tanked at the box office. They'll never come anywhere close to paying back the advances. And they're great books in my view. They just missed. They missed the marketplace. Businesses are like that. Everyone who started restaurants knows that. You have restaurants that put out great food. Your friends love it. But two years later, you close the doors, or 6 months later, you close the doors. And I think my point is that if you want to be successful at something, you kind of have to plan to be in for the long haul and put out enough attempts, knowing that some of those seeds are going to fall on concrete and not take root and not grow. And you'll get a few that will. And maybe one is all it takes for the big win.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, because so often, right. We can know what to do, but a lot of times we don't know what not to do.
Right.
Right. And you got to have those, I don't want to call them failures, because they're such great learning experiences, but you got to have to go through those to be able to connect those dots and going through all that now with what you said, over 24 and only having a handful that have really worked. Yeah, have you got to the point where you felt like now you're able to, from those learning experiences, start to connect the dots of because there's so much when it comes into writing, right? It's not the best written book, it's the best selling book, right? So when it comes to kind of the pre-launch and have you been able to kind of connect the dots somewhat where you're kind of shortening that path for you now?
I'm going to start by saying yes and no and qualify that. I'm going to qualify that by saying yes and no, sort of. So yes, in many ways I'm getting better at it. In many ways, I've certainly learned a lot from specific mistakes. I've learned a lot about things that seem to work and things that seem not to work. And I'll give you a case in point. But then I'll get to the no part. But on the yes part, so Bob and I put out a second parable, and it was called "It's Not About You." And it was kind of the sequel to The Go-Giver. There was some of the character overlap, some of the same principles. So it was set in the same fictional universe, the same fictional city as The Go-Giver. The Go-Giver is a parable. So it's an actual little piece of fiction. It's a story that illustrates certain principles. And so this follow-up book was like a sequel to that, but we called it "It's Not About You." It was the publisher's idea, the title, and he loved the book. And everybody in our sphere, publisher, agent, circle of readers, said this book is even better than The Go-Givers. Everyone loved it. This thing is going to just destroy in the marketplace. People are going to just go ape over this. It just did not sell. Everybody who read it loved it, but not very many people read it. Word just did not spread. And it took, after a year or two, Bob and I got a little bit of feedback that told us, dude, the title, "It's Not About You." People look at that and go, "It's not about you." Well, I guess say, why bother reading it? It's like the title was completely wrong. It was a title that apparently we thought it was a brilliant title, but it's a title that said to people, don't buy this book. And if you do, don't give it as gifts, because you'll be telling your friends, this book is not about you. And it's like, people were giving The Go-Giver as gifts like crazy. It was part of its success. So this book totally didn't work. We went back to the publisher a few years later and said, look, we want to re-release the book, and we want to rewrite it, give it a little bit different twist, a little bit different ending. I saw something I could correct in it, and we're going to call it The Go-Giver Leader. We should have done this to start with. It was a Go-Giver book. We just didn't call it that. We didn't brand it as part of our brand. And so we re-released the book, which you almost never do. Like, totally different title, different cover. And the thing is just doing great. It took off. It's like, ugh. So yeah, we learned something about branding and about titles and about focus and about knowing your marketplace and about having a conversation with your customers before you release something. So in many ways, yes, I'm learning. But now here's the no part. So I wrote a book with an award-winning chef, brilliant, top executive chef, one of the top chefs in the nation. And he had this great idea for a story. He came to me very much like Bob had come to me 10 years ago. He had this idea for a story. I fell in love with the idea. It was going to be like personal growth and leadership and food in one story. The whole story focused around this young boy who'd lost his dad, and the story all took place in this little diner kitchen, kind of like Karate Kid, learning from an old master. But there's life lessons involved, like Karate Kid meets Master Chef, sort of like this. And I loved the idea. We wrote the book, and everyone in our circle said, oh my God, this is great. This is the best thing you've ever written. New York is going to go crazy. All the publishers are going to be at each other's throats together, going to go into auction and try to outbid each other. Yeah, none of that happened.
Yeah.
Took it to New York, and the publishers in New York said, oh my God, love this book. Love the characters, so poignant. The boy, the old man, the cooking is just so vivid. I can taste it. The life lessons are poignant and deep and powerful. I love the whole concept of it, and we'll pass. And this is like, imagine you're an entrepreneur and you've got an idea for a business that you think is killer. An idea for a business that you think will just slay in the marketplace, and you take it to angel investors, and one investor after the other says, I love your idea, man, but it's not for us. We're not going to invest. But I love it. But I love the idea. Just not for us. Like, after a dozen of those, you start going, what the hell? We had 40 publishers turn us down. And so what they told us was, this doesn't fit our category. In fact, we're not sure what category it fits. Like, it's not a business book, which you can call The Go-Giver a business book. So it goes in the business shelf. It fits under marketing, even though it isn't really about marketing. It fits under leadership and management, even though it isn't really about management. But it's it works as a business book, right? Well, you can't really call this one a business book. I mean, I've got people who've read it who are using it with their businesses. So you can actually. There's a whole lesson in there about team building. But on the face of it, like, what is it? Is it a novel? Is it a YA, young adult book? Is it a book about cooking? Does it go in the food section? Does it go in the fiction section? Like, where does it go? Publishers want to have a shelf in Barnes & Noble that the thing fits on. And if they can't see that shelf, they don't want to take the risk. It's just like, doesn't fit. So we had to ask ourselves, and dude, this is like as we sit here and talk, this is still an open question. I don't even know if we're going to succeed big time or if we're going to tank. I just don't know. We said, these guys are publishers. They're professionals. They know what they're doing. The Go Giver was turned down 22 times, by the way, before the 23rd publisher said, I want this book. And he was right. And the 22 were wrong, right? Yep. So we've had that experience. So we're asking ourselves, is this that? Or are they all right? Are we kidding ourselves? What we believe is that there is a marketplace. There is a market of people who love food, who are excited. They watch Food Network, right? They watch Beat Bobby Flay, or they watch MasterChef, or they watch whatever, and who love personal growth, right? Leadership and that whole literature. These are people who probably love Jonathan Livingston Seagull, who probably love The Alchemist, who loved, maybe they love The Go-Giver, and who also love food. We think there's 1 million of those people. There's maybe 5 million of those people. The question is, can we reach them? So what my friend Charles, the chef, Chef Charles and I decided to start our own publishing company and launch it ourselves, which is like not my business model. It's not what I do. It's certainly not what he does. But we decided to roll the dice and do it. So that's what we're doing. And are we right or are we wrong? We'll find out.
Yep.
We don't know.
Yeah. So no, I love that. So, when so with the Go Giver, being turned down 22 times and taking that 23rd, because so many people that have a great idea or want to start a business, maybe they'll go through 3, 4, 5 rejections. And then finally they just get so discouraged. They just give up and stop chasing it. Like what kept you guys going because I can't fathom that most people after 22 no's would be like, hey, let's keep this going. Like what kept you pushing and how did you stay in that right mindset to just not give up on what you had?
Well, there were 2 parts to that. And I think the 2 parts are instructive because first, when we gave the original manuscript to this agent, and we didn't at that time have an agent, but I had a connection through a friend of a friend to an agent. So we managed to get this manuscript in their hands, and she loved it. So that was good. A little bit of confirmation. She brought it to New York, and we got about a dozen, maybe 14 rejections. And at that point, we said, okay, hold the phone. And she said, I don't think this manuscript is ready. It really needs work. And of course, we thought it was perfect, but it wasn't. They were right. She was right. We took it back, and for 9 months, we reworked it. And there was so much red ink on every page. Most of what we were doing was taking stuff out and simplifying. So we did a lot of revision. The last chapter of the book, we threw out and wrote a whole new last chapter, which is completely different. We took a character named Raphael, and we gave him a sex change operation and a gender reassignment, turned him into Rachel. He became Rachel of Rachel's Coffee. We changed a lot in that book and took it back. So the first lesson was, that we got good feedback of what to improve, what to change. Great core idea, but execution needs work. And I think that's often, something to look at. And I will say that with our new book, The Recipe, with these 40 rejections, we took it back and I did a lot of revision and looked at it closely. Because I think the first secret is to always be open to qualified, supportive feedback, even if it's highly critical. But the second piece of it is, even after we'd revised it, we still got a dozen rejections. And it's a great question that I think one thing that kept us going was we had enough people that we'd given it to who told us, no, this is good. We had enough, basically, a customer sampling. We had a customer sample group. And this is something I really have learned about books. Spencer Johnson? Spencer Johnson was the co-author of The 1 Minute Manager. Okay, he was my original inspiration when we wrote The Go-Giver. And Spencer, who's recently passed away, but he was a brilliant man at test marketing books. And the skill he had was he would take a manuscript and give it to 100 people. And he would filter through all their feedback and find the two comments that were really important. He was just brilliant at doing that. And I think that's a huge skill in writing, and probably in anything else that has anything entrepreneurial to it, is the ability to give your idea to a good sphere of potential customers, a sampling group, a test group, and get their feedback, and know how to use that feedback, even when it hurts, even when you disagree. And so we had enough solid feedback telling us, dude, this thing is good. This is worth it. If we hadn't had that, I don't know if we would have kept going.
Yep. No, love it. So then, for most, kind of your average, let's say, entrepreneur that wants to go out there and write a book, because you got to sell a lot of books to make money at books, right?
Right.
And
Right.
So like right now I'm reading a Dan Kennedy book on presentations, but there's not a page that goes by in the book that he doesn't have, some type of sales copy in there that's leading you to an advanced program.
Right.
What kind of recommendations would you have there for those that are wanting to get into this? Is it, hey, look, you're the safe bet is to use this is almost a part of your sales funnel to lead them into another experience, because again, you got to sell so many millions to, we're all not going to be the next Jack Canfield, right? Or whatever.
Right. Not everyone. No, not everyone. Yep. Yeah. Because there's kind of two models there. There's the model of you're writing a book to sell the book, where the book is the product. And then there's the other model, which you allude to here, which is where the book is really part of your sales funnel. And what you're really selling is not the book, but the book is a means to sell what you do, which may be coaching or consulting or teaching or workshops or whatever you do. And, and they're a little bit different because, they're a little bit different principles, because one is like the book is a means to an end, and the other is the book is the end. But they're not fundamentally different. They're not, because in both cases, first off, the book has to be good. The writing has to be good. There's nothing that takes the place of just excellent writing. There's really two things you need to do to have a book be a success. You need to have writing that is just so excellent. And excellent doesn't necessarily mean academically excellent. It doesn't necessarily mean someone who's, schooled and has all the punctuation correct, and it sounds like it came out of a college, which is probably not going to sell books. But what I mean by excellent is the writer has refined that craft, and it could be Jim Patterson is writing books that are very different than Scott Turow, to take crime fiction as a thing. Scott Turow's stuff is very rarefied and refined and pretty skilled, and James Patterson is much more kind of raw, and what you see is what you get. It's much more dime store, but the dude is like the best-selling novelist in the world, right? So it's not about if you use big words or correct punctuation. It's about, have you refined your craft? And that's, I think, the first thing that is the secret to a book doing well. Not just a book, but a blog post, an email. A lot of people need to become better writers just for the sake of their emails. Yeah. They're never going to be published authors. That doesn't matter. You still got to be a good writer, an effective email. I'll take an email and I'll put it away at night, and I'll come back to it the next day, and I might rewrite it 3, 4, 5 times if it's a really important email. So the first recommendation I have for would-be writers, whether it's about writing books or about writing, blogs or reports or whatever it is get yourself a short form. Find some vehicle for short form writing and get it critiqued. Learn how to critique it like crazy. Write with the editing filters off. Just write crap. Write whatever's in your mind. Get stuff down. Let the flow happen. Put it away. Come back to it the next day. I actually have 2 different chairs I work in. I have a chair that I work in, which is over there, back behind me. You can't see it. There it is. That chair back there is where I draft stuff, is where I write stuff brand new on a pad of paper like this with a pen. I have the same pen you have in your hand. And then right here on my computer is where I edit and critique and refine stuff the next day. And I put it out in blog posts. My blog is my practice. It's where I practice writing. It's where I try to write a story with a beginning, middle, and end. It's like maybe 1,000 words long. or it could be 300 words. That's enough. And the world gets to see my practice. So I share it. But the real purpose of my blogs is to practice writing a complete thing, a story, beginning, middle, and end. Everything you write is a story, man. It could be an email, it could be a book, it could be a novel, it could be a business book, it could be a sales letter. Everything you write is a story. It has a beginning, middle, and end. It has suspense, it has characters, it has emotion, it has struggle, it has triumph. So that's the first thing. Whether it's editorials in a newsletter, or it's blogs, or it's newsletters, or whatever, refine your craft in short form, small form, because if you refine it in microcosm, then you can do it in any size. And the second thing is you got to interact with customers, interact with an audience. You've got to have real readers who read your stuff, who aren't your mom and aren't your wife and aren't your best friend, real customers who try your stuff and who tell you what they think. And that's, because you can think you have something that's great, and you need enough customers, enough of a sampling to tell you that your head is in a paper bag. You got it all wrong. Yeah. And that's,
So when you're going through that sampling, because I'm personally going through that now.
Right.
One of my businesses is in the health and fitness space, and we're creating or have created a diet book, right, or a new diet concept, and
right.
We have a list of about 500 people that, received a PDF version of that. And again, same thing. Let us know your feedback. Try the diet. What kind of results are you getting? Because especially when it comes to, a book like that there's a lot of, scientific backing in there. And it's almost like a textbook, right? Right. It's like, how do people, take in this knowledge and grasp it? And I mean, do you have a sample size that you found, because you got to make it enough, right? Like, I don't know, 20 probably isn't enough. I mean, how big do you go with the sample size to make sure that you're getting enough correct feedback?
Yeah. 20 is easy to get. So it's practical. And I think you're right. It's probably not enough. I got this book, The Recipe, that I was just mentioning, that the publishers all rejected. I've got this out to about 150 readers, 175 readers, which is awesome. I mean, and I've gotten feedback from at least 100 of them, and that's really, really sweet. It's also, I think, really important to get feedback from experts, from qualified experts. And in the case that you're talking about, this diet book, so yeah, you want to know, how's the writing? Just forget about the content, forget about the instructions, what it's telling you how to do. Purely as writing, you need at least a handful of people tell you, how is this writing working for you? It's a conversation. Also, what's the layout? So many self-published books. The thing with self-publishing is that self-publishing has a really bad name because so many self-published books look terrible. They look self-published. They look like they were produced by somebody who has a great idea, but did not go to design school, which is probably the truth. So you need, in my view, for a book to be successful, and there are exceptions to this that prove the rule, but by and large, to be successful, your diet book or your fitness book, it needs to look professional. There's a reason that design parameters exist. If it, jams to the edge of the page, if there's space between a lot of self-published books, there's a space between every paragraph. I don't know why people do this, but it makes the book impossible to read or hard to read, because every time you reach the end of a paragraph, you go, and you go to the next one. So without even consciously knowing it, subconsciously, what's happening is you're losing track of every paragraph, you're losing track of the thread of the book. Things like that people who aren't trained in book design and layout don't know. So, I think it's you got to have professional help if you're going to self-publish in design and layout, as well as in editing and linguistic style, in addition to whatever the content is, which you're the expert on. So you probably don't need the experts on that.
Yeah. Well, and the cool thing that I love about today is you no longer have to go get some, fancy degree to learn this stuff. I mean, things like Udemy, I mean, for $19, you can learn how to code your own app, right? Yeah. So there, I mean, there's too many resources for people to have this excuse or reason of, well, I just don't know how. Right. Right. And what would you say to those they're like, John, I mean, you just have this amazing gift, right? Well, okay. I mean, yeah, there may be some truth to that, but you also have thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of hours into your craft that, now you make it look so simplistic, but how many thousands and thousands of hours, did it take for you to master that craft?
Yeah. One thing I did was I spent, as I said before, I think I spent 10 years or more, probably more than that, editing other people's stuff, which is cool if you get a chance to do it, because you're not as emotionally attached to other people's stuff as you are to your own stuff. So it's easier to rip it apart. So I say, this is a piece of crap. Maybe we rip it up. But there's a few good thoughts in it. We put this good thought here, good thought there, blah, blah. I grew up watching my father editing and correcting graduate school papers. And so it's like, this is something I saw at his knee. But anybody can edit other people's stuff. Everybody has a blog or a newsletter or whatever. And it's not, I think editing other people's stuff is a great way to get the skill. And the answer to your question is, hundreds of hours, hundreds of, thousands of hours. One thing that really has distinguished my writing over the decade I've been doing it as a book author is I really rewrite a lot. I self-critique a lot. I write first drafts that have 5% or 3% in there is good stuff that I'm going to end up using. And the rest I may throw away, but the 3% is a germ of a good idea. And so, I think you have to be, there are all kinds of, famous writers who will say things like, writing is rewriting. Well, that's true. Good writing is rewriting. And that's really true. So, if you want to be a good writer, you need to be prepared to put in the time on the craft and just rewrite, improve. I've never seen a column that I've written that I couldn't improve by making it shorter.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, do you ever find it difficult when you're rewriting to, because it just seems like that could then just be an ongoing thing, and then it just never gets to release, right? I mean, do you find it difficult to just kind of hit that point where it's like, all right, so it's been rewritten enough. I mean, I got to get this thing out there.
I don't find that difficult. It's just reality. I mean, because I have deadlines, real deadlines with publishers and so forth, and plus which I have 2 more projects, pushing on me. So there comes a time when I say, I think it's the best I can do right now. But I'll tell you something that happened to me that was really instructive. I wrote this book for a guy named Jeff Olson, who is CEO of a big direct selling company. And Jeff had written this book back started in the 1990s, actually. It was a book called The Slight Edge. And I worked with him to finish it and make it into a book in the early 2000s. And it came out, I think, 2005, something like that. 8 years later, they came back and said they wanted to do a new edition. So I had this rare opportunity to take something that I'd done, which was as done as I could do it, right, in 2005. Is that this thing was finished 2004, really, before it went. And then to take it back and look at it and said, who wrote this piece of crap? Oh, my God. And I had the chance to completely rewrite it. And I did. I threw chapters out, put whole new chapters in, to move stuff around. And what it taught me was, probably any book I've written, if you gave it back to me 8 years later, I would probably, do a lot of rewriting. But, you got to reach a point where you say, hey, I've done my best. The world is ready for it. I'm ready for it. People are ready for it. Besides, I got to move on. So, you could keep refining, but the world keeps moving. So you just got to get on the train.
Yeah, love it. Now with starting your own publishing company, and I know the purpose of that was to be able to publish your new book. But now that that's been created, I mean, do you see yourself going down, the future path of becoming a full-on publisher and then helping other authors become best-selling authors?
I'm not sure yet. That's still an open question. I did this with 2 purposes. One, as you said, was to create this company in order to publish this particular book. But I also wanted to start the company, if I was going to do that, like if that's what had to happen, get the book out, then I also wanted to have a second purpose, which is to learn how to start a publishing company, learn how a company like this works. Like, in other words, not just get this book out, but figure this model out. How does this work? I already know how to produce a book because I've had a lot of background in book design and jacket design and layout and so forth. So physically producing a book is not that hard for me. Plus, these days, with the technology that's out there, you can put out not only, Create Space and Kindle, paperback and ebook, but you can put out hardcovers and POD, print on demand. You can put out audiobooks through different channels. I mean, you can physically distribute a book through all the channels. Just anybody can do that. It's the democratization of technology. So that's not my challenge. The challenge is marketing, promoting, reaching a readership. I am not a guy with a huge platform. Even though I've sold, as you said, 2 million copies of books, people don't think of them as my books. They think of them as Bob Berg's books, or Brandon Webb, the SEAL Sniper's books, or Daniel Burris, the Trend Forecaster's books, or Betsy Myers, the leadership. So I don't have, I'm not a famous guy in the sense of I just put the tweet out and 500,000 people say, gotta buy the book. So building a platform, learning how to reach a marketplace, learning how to actually take a produced book and just get it out there. That's been the learning curve. And, will we use that platform with other titles in the future? I'm open to that. It's still an open question, but I think it's kind of if this book works to any significant level, then probably the answer will be yes.
Yep. Love it. So then, for those, because again, I mean, I know that everybody that's probably watching and listening to this right now has the deep down desire to go out there and write a book, right? And hope in hopes that, right, it's going to be successful and have the impact that they want it to have. Yeah. I mean, and I know that this is probably a very tough question to answer, but, would you be able to boil down like, hey, if you're going to do this, like here's the top 3 things that you must avoid, right? To ensure that you don't just crumble with what you're trying to do.
And you're talking about writing a book or writing and producing yourself?
Well, I mean, whether it's self-publishing or going through a publisher, maybe the one mistake is don't self-publish, right? I don't know, Yeah.
So, sure. Things to avoid. Three top things to avoid. I'll make this up as I go along. What's the first thing? Well, the first thing I want to say is not something to avoid, but it's the opposite. Something you have to do. If you want to write a book that draws a lot of readers, the writing has to be great. And don't be intimidated by the word great. You don't have to be Hemingway. You don't have to be James Joyce. You don't have to be Stephen Covey. All I mean by great is what Seth Godin means in his little book, The Dip, this gem of a little book. Right? You're the best in the world for what you're doing in your sphere, in your channel. So it has to be the best you can possibly do. To do that, my number one prescription is read great writing. You can't write great writing if you don't read great writing. It doesn't matter what sphere you read in. It could be mystery novels. It could be crime novels. It could be fantasy. It could be romance novels. It could be business books. It could be tech books. It could be history. It could be biography. It could be anything. But find the great stuff in that category and read great stuff. Read great. You got to get great writing in your ears, in your eyes, in your blood. That's, you can't breathe out without breathing in good air. So whenever I get writer's block or it threatens, I just put what I'm doing down and I go and I pick up a great mystery novel, like Tana French or Raymond Chandler or something just totally inspiring. And I read great stuff. So that's number one. I think a thing to avoid is when you write, the number one thing that strangles most potential writing in the cradle, that keeps most great writers from ever writing, becoming finished, is the self-critical voice. You start writing and you think, oh man, it's like, I shouldn't say that's, am I redundant? Is that good? You start critiquing as you write. You can't do that. I do it still, but I know how to turn it off. I've learned how to turn it off. You have to have 2 different modes that you operate. You have to have a mode where you just write, where you just put it down, even as you knowing that it's crap while you're doing it, you still just write it down. And then you put it away, whether it's for an hour or a day or a week. And then you go back to it and you practice your craft of saying, now, how can I make that better? What can I take out? Where's the good stuff? If you can't turn off your self-critical voice and exercise the muscle of just trusting your impulse, even when you think it's crappy, then you'll never write and you'll also never start a business. Yeah. Every entrepreneur needs that too. That's the number one thing to avoid is your critical voice when you don't need it. You know how to turn it on when you do need it, because you also need it, but that's later. It's a separate thing. Stephen King has this wonderful thing he says about writing. He says, I always write the first draft with the door closed and the second draft with the door open. So the first draft, don't show it to anybody while you're writing it. Don't write 2 pages and take it to your best friend and say, hey, man, look at this. What do you think? Because you're vulnerable. You're like a little child at that point. No. It's fragile. Close the door. Don't show anybody. Same thing with a business plan. If you have this idea for a business, don't share it. Don't share it. Nurture it. Nurture it. Let it get past the larval stage until it's ready, until it has a little bit of a shell, and then you can take it and tell people, what do you think about this idea? Test it. That's the second draft with the door open, as King says. I think in terms of that's in terms of writing. In terms of the publishing part, publishing with the publisher versus self-publishing are two really, really different spheres. And there's this sort of middle sphere, which is publishing with a small publisher, or there are a lot of outfits now they're sort of like, give us $5,000 or $20,000 or $2,000 or whatever, and we'll publish it for you, and we'll make it into a bestseller or on Amazon or whatever. I would be very wary of that middle crowd. There are some good eggs in there, but there's a lot of, uncooked eggs, let's just say, in there. It's a boom industry right now. The we will help you self-publish industry. And if you think about it, it's kind of an oxymoron. I will help you self-publish. Isn't it like, wait a second, how is it self then?
Yeah.
So there's great resources in there, great consultants, great outfits. So I'm not saying they're all bad, but I would be very careful with that and be really clear. The challenges of self-publishing and the challenge of regular publishing are very different, but they're both there. The challenge of regular publishing is it's really hard to break in. And once you do break in, you've got to know that you're going to have to sell the book. They're not going to sell the book for you. They're going to publish it, and if you're lucky, they might do some marketing, but you're still going to be the one who actually has to get it out in the world to some extent with your platform and your connections and your media, whatever, your social media outreach. The challenge in self-publishing is that it's super easy to do, super easy to get it out there, super easy for it to be mediocre.
Yeah.
So it's up to you to create the quality standards and gather the resources to help you reinforce those, whether it's the writing, the editing, the spelling, the grammar, the layout, the design, the cover, whatever. And that's the challenge of that.
Yeah, no, I love that you brought that up because you see constantly, especially, with social media, everybody's a guru today. And it's hey, come to my weekend workshop and have your book done in 48 hours. And I'm just how does that even happen?
When we made the decision to self-publish the recipe, I'll tell you what the first thing I did was once the decision was made, right? We locked that door and threw away the key. We're in. So the first pragmatic decision that I had to make was, okay, who am I going to listen to? Because I don't know this. I don't know this field. So I needed to learn who am I going to listen to? And more importantly, who am I not going to listen to? And I spent like 10 days, 2 weeks, 3 weeks checking in with a few friends, trusted friends I have, and doing a little, scoping on online and looking at some books. And I picked one book. There's 1,000 books out there telling you how to self-publish and self-promote, right? I picked one book. It's called Book Launch Blueprint by Tim Grahl, Grahl, brilliant. And with a track record, which is important. I picked one consultant. Her name is Jane Friedman, and she's brilliant and she's great. Best $300 I ever spent. And, I went like that. I picked a couple of different resources. I picked one outfit that I was going to use to get my ebook produced and distributed. It's called Pronoun. I picked one outfit that I was going to go to for my my audiobook distribution. And once I picked my resources, I pretty much closed the door on everything else. Not totally. About 2-3 months in, I dropped a check for a couple grand on a publicist to help us do some radio shows. Which I had started out saying I would never do. But the strategy moved a little bit as we grew, planned, but we didn't have a big budget. We don't have a lot of time, and we had no room for confusion. And so the first decision was who to listen to, shut out everybody else.
Yeah. Yep. Love it. So then what do you do? Because when you're writing, it's different than going to, if that's a career and you want to make, or you're wanting to make it a career, because it's different like going to my regular job, that I'm kind of, I mean, I don't know, maybe I've got 90% of this on kind of a subconscious autopilot, because it does take so much creative, brain capacity. And you hear so many people that kind of hit writer's block, they run out of creativity. And if you found certain things where it's just like, hey, I write at this time of day for these blocks, or when you do get that writer's block where it's just like, hey, the ideas aren't flowing, if you found effective ways to kind of minimize the amount of time that it takes for that creativity to come back.
Yeah, definitely. One thing is just about the writing itself. Like John Irving, the novelist who wrote, The World According to Garp, and he writes these huge, sprawling, like 19th century type novels, like Herman Melville type novels. He's amazing, and he writes for, I forget, he says like 6, 8, 9 hours a day. But he said he's been a wrestling coach all his life, and he's a quality wrestler. And he said, it's my wrestling training has actually helped me get in shape to write. And when I first read that, I thought, oh, come on, get in shape to write. And I realized he's absolutely right. Because I'll tell you, man, anyone tells you that they write 6, 7, 8, 9 hours a day, they're lying. Unless they're John Irving or something. I don't. I can tell you that. I got about 2 hours of good writing in me. And by good writing, what I mean is I'm generating new material. I'm generating fresh ideas. I got 2 hours. Some days it's 90 minutes. Some days it's an hour, maybe 3. But more than that, because I've got a day job too. My day job is revising other stuff that I've already written, answering email, doing correspondence, doing what you and I are doing right now, cooking with my wife, taking walks with my dog, going to the grocery store, handling my bills, I have a life. Yep. And so I really got about like 2 to 3 hours max of generating time. And I have found for me that works first thing in the morning, cup of hot tea, before anything, before breakfast, before email, before voicemail, just fresh. And it's almost like meditation. Get in my chair, get a pad of blank paper, get a pen, get a cup of hot tea. I'll go through 2-3 cups of tea, and that's my writing time. And I have found that that's what I need to do when I'm writing something new. Now, if I'm in a place where I've got a sort of a draft and I'm taking it from there, and so I've got a couple of months of revising and elaborating, extending that stuff, I can do that anytime. I can do that at 9 o'clock at night. But the generating stuff, I got to do that, first thing in the morning.
Yep. Yeah, I think it's so, I've when I talk about the books, it's my partners that have the knowledge in their head, right? So it's really them that, I'm kind of more, I guess, where you started out, where, I'm inserting kind of the sales copy and just a second set of eyeballs on though. But I create a lot of other content with whether it's video content, or I've got a software company, and I found just the power of having the awareness. Just slowing down enough to realize, hey, what time of the day, do I operate best at doing this, whatever it may be, and just having that awareness so you can develop that routine is so huge. When
I made the decision to do the recipe, to self-publish, it was a big decision because I had 2 other major books that had to get done over the same period. It actually ended up being 3. Right now, here we are, we're talking in the early part of September, and I've got 2 books on an October 1 deadline. It's insane. And I remember thinking, how can I do all the promotion and logistics for this book and also write these books? And I quickly discovered I do the writing in the morning first thing. And by 10 or 11, it's like I close the door on that. And then whether it's a podcast like this or, whatever else I do, it's like living 2 lives. It's like I've got a secret life. I've got an alter. It's like Jekyll and Hyde. I'm not sure which one this is. But I think you have to do that. You have to know when, like you're saying, it's video content, it's software, you're coding, whatever you're doing website design. It's creative. You're generating stuff that didn't exist. And you need to know how you operate. My dad, when he was writing his book, a book that he published in the 50s, and I still get residual for it today, a book of music composition, the study of counterpoint, he and my mom would work on it for an hour every night from 10 o'clock to 11. That worked for them. In that hour from 10 to 11 every night, they got a book done that still pays me and my 2 brothers, half a century later. So you got to find your time and know how it works.
Yeah, love it, love it. So, John, where's I know you've got your blog, and
Yes.
you've got the couple dozen books you've already written, and then and I don't know if you have a kind of like a pre-registration place to sign up for when the recipe is released. But for those that want to follow you, learn more about you, check out your books, because they're all in alignment with what our listeners are trying to go out there. They're all trying to go out there and create the best businesses and create the best life they possibly can. Where's the best place to follow you, learn more about this, and get your books?
Okay, so two things. First is I focus everything that I do on my website. My website is my hub. All my books are there. Excerpts, sample chapters, reviews, buy links. It's all there. My blog is also there, which, as I said, is my practice. I do it, every week or every other week or so, and that's just simply my name, JohnDavidMann, 2Ns.com. JohnDavidMann.com is I'm on Twitter some and Facebook some, but mostly my website is where you'll find me. Yeah. And then there is we're doing a pre-order bonus special. My co-author, the chef, and I shot some video footage of me interviewing him, Charlie Rose style, and him cooking some of the recipes from the book that are in the book actually, and talking about the book and a bunch of things. And so that you can get that stuff by pre-ordering the book, and that has its own website, which is theingredientsofgreatness.com.
Yeah, love it. That's awesome. So, those that are watching and listening, they're here because they want to go out there and create their own amazing life for themselves and their family. With all the success that you've created and all this reinvention that you've went through, what advice would you give those that are watching and listening right now? Last words, whether it's advice, inspiration, motivation that they can apply so they can go out there and create the life they know they want and deserve.
Sure. So this latest reinvention, I should say, it was born out of a period of my life which was pretty terrible. I mean, there was a bankruptcy, there was a divorce, there was loss of some friends. I mean, it was a rough time. The thing I would say there is that I believe it's to accomplish anything great in the world, it's critically important that you learn to listen to and trust your own voice. That you have this thing inside that nobody else can tell you that if you listen. But at the same time, the universe knows you in some ways better than you know yourself. And you're always being, I believe, you're always being surrounded by clues and hints as to the next path, the ideal path, or the optimum path for you to follow in the next, month, year, whatever. Decade. And those clues and hints might come from individuals who have your best interests at heart, and they support you, and they're wise advisors. And it may come from circumstances that are ugly and that are not so great. They may be open roads, they may be brick walls. What I would say is have the faith that the path is there, your path. It really is there, the right path. And there could be multiple right paths. They're all there. But also that to find the clues, they may be placed in your landscape. And so to be open, while trusting yourself, be open to the clues, be open to the hints, be open to the wisdom that you don't have access to on your own, and that you only have access to through listening to circumstance and to others.
Yeah. Powerful words. Love it. And those watching and listening, I know I ain't every podcast with this, but information without implementation is really just the start of delusion. It's not information that's power any longer. It's taking that information, taking action on it that creates that power in your life so you can go out there and, again, create that life you want and deserve. And John shared so many just amazing pieces of advice with you guys. Take something that you learned today, start taking immediate action so, again, you can create that life you want and deserve. And I don't care where you're at, whether you're on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, YouTube, the website. In the show notes below, there's going to be links to John's website, plus the pre-order site for the new book. So make sure to go check those out. And John, I know how busy you are. Truly appreciate you taking time out of your busy day to be here. This has been a lot of fun.
Hey man, go out and GSD, as I've said my whole life.
Yeah, that's the only way to roll. All right.
I'm with you, man.
All right. Well, thanks again, you guys, and we will see you next time.